How to Read a Book. The book was written by Mortimer Adler and Charles Van Doren. Adler, the primary author, was a legendary figure in American academic and publishing circles. Initially aspiring to be a journalist, he dropped out of school to work at a newspaper, later attending night school to improve his writing skills. During this time, he read the autobiography of 19th-century British thinker John Stuart Mill, who had read Plato's works at age 5. This revelation shocked Adler and sparked his passion for philosophy, leading him to pursue formal university education. Although he never received his bachelor's degree due to refusing to take physical education classes, he eventually became a faculty member. He wrote the first edition of How to Read a Book and gained worldwide recognition as the editor of the 15th edition of Encyclopaedia Britannica in 1974. The co-author, Van Doren, was Adler's protege and came from an intellectual family. His father was a renowned literature professor. A gifted scholar from childhood, Van Doren participated in a popular American quiz show in the 1950s, winning for 14 consecutive weeks. However, there was a scandal. The producers had secretly provided him with answers to boost ratings and create an intellectual hero. When Van Doren later revealed the truth, he was dismissed from his university position and subsequently went to work with Adler. The current version of How to Read a Book is Van Doren's extensively revised edition of Adler's original work. The book has remained relevant for over 70 years because it's not just a practical guide to reading. It helps newcomers avoid common pitfalls while offering deeper insights to experienced readers. The book focuses on two main aspects: the benefits of reading and reading techniques. Regarding benefits, the authors propose an interesting test. If you were going to live on a deserted island for an extended period, with no TV, radio, computer, or Wi-Fi, which 10 books would you bring along with your essential supplies? This question has no right answer, but it makes us contemplate. Why do humans need to read? Why would we need books even in such harsh conditions as a deserted island? The authors argue that our mental capabilities, like muscles, atrophy without use, and reading is the most effective way to prevent mental decline and slow cognitive aging. Our minds and bodies don't develop in parallel. While our physical peak occurs around age 30 before declining, our mental capabilities can continue developing indefinitely. Conversely, neglecting mental exercise can have fatal consequences. This explains why many workaholics pass away shortly after retirement. Their work was the driving force behind their mental activity, and without this external stimulus, if they don't consciously maintain mental exercise, death will soon follow. In this sense, using reading to keep our minds and thinking abilities active is literally a matter of life and death. So, how important would you say reading is? Now that we've clarified the benefits of reading, let's discuss reading techniques. With the spread of education and the advancement of media and internet, reading today is quite different from when this book was written, but certain fundamental aspects remain unchanged. In today's information age, speed reading is widely promoted, but this book provides an important principle. Different books should be read at different speeds, and not all books should be read as quickly as possible. As the French scholar Pascal said over 300 years ago, reading too fast or too slow yields nothing. So which books should be read quickly, and which should be read carefully and slowly? The author divides reading materials into two categories: those we can understand easily, and those we must read. The easily understood materials include newspapers and magazines, things we can digest quickly. These provide information but don't increase our understanding. If you're perceptive, you'll notice these materials offer little intellectual nourishment. The second category, the must-read materials, refers to content that's slightly above our current level of understanding. How to Read a Book primarily focuses on the second category. According to this book, a good reader should focus more on books that exercise their intellect. To be a qualified reader, one must first be active. Active readers gain greater benefits from reading. Before opening a book, an active reader must remember these 4 questions. First, what is the book about as a whole? Second, how does the author develop the details? Third, is the book true, completely, or partially? Fourth, what does this book mean to you? Corresponding to these questions are different levels of reading, each with its own techniques. These 4 levels, from lowest to highest, are elementary reading, inspectional reading, analytical reading, and syntopical reading. Elementary reading. The first level, requires only basic literacy to understand the literal meaning. This needs no further explanation. Inspectional reading, the second level, is essentially systematic skimming. It has two stages. First, learn to skim systematically. Start with the title, preface, and subtitle, then study the table of contents and index, read about the author, and look through chapters related to the main topic. This technique requires background knowledge, which becomes easier as you read more. The second stage is superficial reading, reading through the entire book regardless of your comprehension level. After using this method, you'll have a basic understanding of the book's category, subject, and content. Analytical reading, the third level, is more complex and systematic. The author dedicates significant space to explain its three stages. Stage 1 is understanding the scope. What is the book about? Identify the theme and classification, literature, history, economics, etc. Summarize the content briefly, list key chapters, and identify the questions the author aims to address. Simply put, don't start reading without understanding the book structure. Stage 2 is understanding the content. How did the author write it? Find recurring keywords, mark important sentences, identify the author's central ideas, and reconstruct the book's logic through note-taking. Sometimes a simple chart can help. Looking at your notes helps you quickly review how the book's arguments unfold. Stage 3 is evaluation. How well is the book written? Always form your own opinion, but don't jump to conclusions before finishing. The best learners are often the best critics. If you disagree with the author after reading, learn to summarize why. If you don't understand the author's viewpoint, list your reasons. The fourth and highest level of reading is called thematic reading. Simply put, it means reading books based on themes that interest you. This level of reading requires greater initiative and reader judgment. Thematic reading isn't about reading books sequentially. Rather, it's about reading different chapters from different books to solve specific problems. It's not reading for reading's sake, but reading to solve practical issues. Moving from theory to practice, let me share two examples based on the book's discussion. Typically, bookstores prominently display two types of books, fiction and history, the most popular categories among leisure readers. For fiction, the author suggests fast reading with complete immersion. Ideally, a story should be read in one sitting, though this is nearly impossible for busy people. The next best approach is to compress your reading time into reasonable chunks. Otherwise, you'll forget earlier parts as you progress. The most crucial aspect of reading fiction is using your imagination to step away from social reality. Work to let the characters enter your heart. Imagine yourself as the protagonist, and try to live in the story's world rather than the real one. The best way to read stories is to immerse yourself without rushing to judgment. Take Leo Tolstoy's masterpiece, War and Peace, as an example. This massive work contains numerous characters that can overwhelm readers. Many give up after a few pages, daunted by the long, complex Russian names. They abandon the book, believing they'll never understand the relationships between characters. This applies to many lengthy novels. This challenge can be overcome. Consider moving to a new city or neighborhood and starting fresh relationships. At a community gathering, you can't immediately integrate or make friends. Colleagues, classmates, and guests initially blur together, making it impossible to remember everyone's names. However, you'll remember the face of someone who chatted with you for an hour or the name of someone you plan to meet again. The same applies to reading novels. We don't need to remember every name. Many characters are simply background, highlighting the protagonist's actions. After finishing War and Peace or any lengthy novel, we'll know the key characters and won't forget them. Even years later, mentioning Pierre or Natasha instantly brings the story back to mind. History books form another major reading category. History is essentially stories from past to present. We're interested in the present and future, and since part of the future is determined by the present, we read history to learn potential future developments. Two key points for reading history. First, read multiple accounts of events or periods that interest you. Second, don't just focus on what happened in the past. Understand why people acted as they did in any time period, especially the present. Though history resembles fiction more than science, approach it like reading a manual. First, recognize that each history book has a specific, limited scope. A book about the American Civil War might ignore the broader 19th century world history. To read history well, we must understand exactly what the book covers. Second, understand how the story is told. Is it chronological or organized differently? Does it discuss economics, culture, and religion in separate chapters for each period? Which chapters are most important? Understanding this helps identify the author's priorities and the book's core message. Finally, let's briefly discuss thematic reading, reading multiple books on the same theme. For example, comparing the American novel Gone with the Wind and the Russian novel War and Peace. While both are novels about great wars, that's where the similarities end. Take, for example, the French author Stendhal's The Charterhouse of Parma, which, like War and Peace, is set against the backdrop of the Napoleonic Wars. However, neither book is primarily about the war itself. In both stories, war merely provides the setting and background, while the main themes explore human existential dilemmas. War is simply a hook to draw readers in. So if our reading goal is to study war, these novels wouldn't be the right choice. Thematic reading essentially involves two phases. First is the preparation phase, where you create a reading list related to your theme. You can consult library catalogs, bibliography indexes, and online search results. Then quickly browse through all the books to determine which ones are relevant to your theme. The second phase is thematic reading itself, which involves 5 steps. 1. Scan the selected books to find the most relevant chapters. 2. Develop a set of key terms related to your theme. 3. Establish your own objective viewpoint and list questions you want answered. 4. Distinguish between primary and secondary issues, organizing different answers under each question. 5. Analyze these issues, arranging your questions and answers in sequence to highlight your theme. You might feel overwhelmed at this point. With countless books in the world, even after excluding informational and entertainment books, there are still thousands of classics. What should you do? Don't worry, there's a pyramid of books, and truly great ones are rare. The author defines great books as those that grow with your intellect. When you first read them, they're far beyond your level. When you reread them now, they still surpass you. And when you read them again in the future, they continue to exceed your understanding. Such books are few, no more than 100. These are the books worth reading repeatedly. Take comfort in knowing that people differ not just in intellect, but in taste. What's meaningful to one person may mean less to another. You might never feel about Newton the way you feel about Shakespeare, perhaps because mathematics and physics aren't your cup of tea. If you love mathematics, like Darwin did, then Newton might be your greatest author, not Shakespeare. Remember, if your goal is self-improvement through reading, you can't read everything. Reading a poor book can be discouraging and off-putting. The author notes that reading a good book offers 2 major rewards. First, successfully reading a challenging book improves your reading skills. Second, in the long term, a good book teaches you about yourself and the world. You gain not just knowledge, but understanding of life's meaning. These are the reading principles discussed in How to Read a Book. It explains the benefits and techniques of reading. Reading is the most effective way to prevent mental decline and delay cognitive aging. The general principle is to read materials slightly above our level. When opening a book, focus on 4 key points: what it's about, how it's detailed, whether it's reasonable, and how it relates to us. Reading can be divided into 4 stages: elementary reading, inspectional reading, analytical reading, and syntopical reading, each with its own techniques and considerations. Once you master different reading methods for different types of books, you'll reap tremendous rewards from your reading journey. This reading classic, which has been a bestseller for over 70 years, will bring you fresh insights into the art of reading.